Three-rail O has always been an oddity when it comes to command control. Either you use Team CC, Legacy, or DCS to run your trains. However, thanks to a new revolutionary product, that is all about to change. Tonight we speak with George from Soundtraxx as we dive into the exciting new world of Blunami. How can it be used to upgrade or bring old models back to life? What advantages does it have over existing systems? How can it elevate your immersion when running trains? All this and a whole lot more. So get your ticket from the station, grab a seat, and make sure you don't miss the train. All aboard! Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning into episode 89 of the Miniature Models Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rochford, and with me, as always, are my fellow co-hosts, John, Johnny, and Sid. How are we tonight, gentlemen?
Super excited to be back in the studio, and even more excited to have Radio Rochford back.
Yeah, we have missed having you emceeing, man. We need the NPR voice in the pilot's seat. It is so good to be here, man.
Yeah, you have the ultimate radio voice.
We have John's impressions of you, but we can only get so far with those.
I've heard them. They're done very well.
They're not
I
as
appreciate
good
that.
as you. I can't really get the that sort of deep push up from the chest that you get. It's really good when you do that.
I am flattered, genuinely flattered. All right, well, this is another highly anticipated show that we've been planning for a long time, so I'm happy to introduce our guest tonight, George from Soundtraxx. George, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. This is exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. We are looking forward to speaking with you as well. And since we have so much to cover tonight, we want to take full advantage of our time with our amazing guests. So we're going to dive straight into our topic for tonight and save our normal check-in for another episode. We do have a really quick kind of icebreaker just to get things started. But before we do that, I wanted to tell a quick story about my interaction with Soundtraxx. And specifically you, George. So it's good. It's a good story.
I was going to say, I didn't do it. Nobody saw me do it. Can't prove I did it.
So I think this story pays dividends to how Soundtraxx works with the model railroading community. So last year in the summer, I wanted to upgrade my HO Concord Pioneer Zephyr to DCC and sound. Now I went to Lombard Hobby. Now Lombard Hobby is 5 minutes from my house. So this is both a blessing and a curse at the same time, obviously, because I spend way too much time there and way too much money there. Now, I was talking to the Lombard folks, and they didn't really have an answer for me. But they said, you know what? Soundtraxx probably does. And I say, okay, well, I'll reach out to them and send them an email, ask them the question. And they're like, no. We'll just call Soundtraxx right now, and you can ask them. And I was like, wait, what's happening here? And they're like, yeah. So they called you, George. They got you on the phone, and then they handed me the phone, and they're like, here, talk to George. You can ask him the question that you want. And I was kind of like, man, I was a little bit blown away, and I think this really set the bar high for the customer support from Soundtraxx and from you, George, that like I go to my local shop, and they're just like, oh, you have a question from one of our products? Sure, here, talk to the people in charge of this product right now. And I was just kind of blown away by that, that situation.
Well, hopefully I gave you the right answer.
You did. I'm still working on that project, but I did pick up a Tsunami board for that. So,
well, from my perspective, and I have a great working relationship with the folks at Lombard, and there's been times when Andrew's texted me over the weekend and asked a question, and I answer him right back. If I'm available, I'll answer him right away, because that's when you need to know the answer. Because here's the thing, like you're in the store and you're ready to buy a decoder and they're not sure of the answer. Well, if they send you off to research the answer, you may either come to a different conclusion, you may not find the correct answers, and then you may search another brand. Or let's, for argument's sake, say you even go online and maybe in your research you find somebody that's 30 cents or whatever cheaper, and you're like, well, This one's going to be delivered to my house. Why not? And so we want to capture that, but we want to help you when you need the help. And so I've told the folks at Lombard and other stores around the country, if you need my help and it's within business hours, call us. We're here to partner with you. And so we do value that partnership with the retail stores around the country, and then also to help serve the customer as well, which is you, of course.
Excellent. Yeah. I thank you so much for that. And it just really kind of shows the type of company that Soundtraxx is.
Yeah, it's I gotta say, I've gotten the same kind of vibe. Not talking to you ever directly, George, but just the sort of kind of like the energy you put out, man. You know, like your company's like just the general attitude you have toward your customers really speaks volumes. And hearing that story, Matt, that sounds exactly par for the course for what you guys are all about.
Well, the other thing I'll add is a little personal anecdote here is, I grew up in the hobby. I've been basically a model railroader since I was 14. Now I do some of that minuscule half O stuff. But when I started in the hobby, I didn't have the experience. Nobody's born knowing how to model railroad. And so this is all a collection of skills that we've collected over the years. And so, somebody had to, when I was 14, somebody had to teach me how to paint a box car. Somebody had to teach me how to lay decals. Somebody had to teach me how to wire track, lay track, ballast the track, scenery, everything. It's all different parts of it. And so when it comes to the digital world, I have an expertise now that I didn't have even prior to donning the purple shirt. And people used to call me the DCC guru, which I hate that term, but I was the DCC guru in my club. And after working here for like 2 or 3 years, I realized I didn't know squat. I just figured out how to run my train. And everybody looked at me as like some sort of mystical creature that figured out how to run trains with digital, because the whole digital world is filled with a lot of jargon and a lot of terms that seem confusing, especially to the average lay person. And so from that perspective, now that I'm in the industry, I take this as my opportunity to not only pay back to the community that's given me so much enjoyment over the years, over many years, but also to help promote our product, because I have a different perspective, because I was once the dumb guy who didn't know how to push the buttons on the throttle. I was that guy, and I learned the stuff. And I figure if a dumb guy like me can learn it, I can try to help everybody learn it. And so I enjoy this aspect of it, this learning, the teaching, the sharing my experiences with, fellow model railroaders, because all in all, no matter what size trains we work, we're all doing basically the same thing. We want to have fun running our trains. And so if I can help take away a lot of that mystique or that apprehension that people hear when they say, "Oh, you mean I got to learn digital stuff?" If I can take away any of that, I'm all for it 100%. And I'm a phone call or an email away if people have questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you, George. And let's go ahead and just kind of do our quick icebreaker here, just to kind of break up the room a little bit and have some fun before we deep dive into Blunami. So what is an engine that died on you that you have to upgrade, or does anyone here have a project engine that is still waiting upgrades? Sid, I'm going to call you out.
No, it makes sense. I always have something on the bench, whether it's mine or someone else's. I have a third rail Mercury. It's a 462 Pacific, and it came from the factory with bare bones Lino, TMCC command control, and it was pretty bad. It didn't run very well, and it didn't sound very good either. And so it's awaiting electronics of some kind, as John knows, because he comes over, every weekend at this rate. It's been every weekend. It's been sitting there for about at least a year and a half. And so it's stripped down. It's got nothing in it, and it's just waiting something. What I'm going to put into it, I don't know yet. I just know that anything is better than what was in it. And it's just one of those projects where I just got to do it. I have the new motor for it, and I have all the components to really put anything into it. It's just one of those things where I keep kind of moving past it and working on other things. but that's something I really need and want to work on, because that train as a whole is beautiful.
Yeah, that's one of those trains that can just honestly, even if you don't put anything into it, it could just sit there and still be interesting to look at.
Yeah, it's a pretty one. It's a unit train for sure. It's that is a passenger train that when you have it all put together is just amazing.
I guess I'll hop in next here. The one for me that I've had quite a few because I've upgraded quite a lot of things over the last couple of years. I think the one that's currently next that's on my list is my third rail P10. That is in the San Joaquin colors, and that engine has I think was it EOB in there, Sid? It has to be.
Yeah, it's got EOB.
Yeah, because the thing has the most generic TMCC sounds, and it sounds like a garbage disposal every time it tries to move because that motor whine is horrific. So
Yeah, the motor the motor control isn't very good.
no, it's not particularly great. But you know what? That's what Blunami is for. So, and it's Blunami will be able to easily fit in that nightmare Vanderbilt tender because I can't fit much else in there. So that's probably my next one.
John, how about yourself?
Oh man, I know what it is right away. It's my pair of Williams 70 tonners that I bought quite a while ago. To do as I bought them with the intent of them being my first Blunami upgrades. I have yet to be able to do a DCC upgrade myself on O scale, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's kind of like once I knew that Blunami was a thing, I was like, well, this is the perfect opportunity to get this done. So very much looking forward to having those done. And like I said, it just seems like the perfect kind of locomotive for that project. Kind of specific and unique. It's funny. I was just talking with someone in the Discord about this today. It's one of Williams' best locomotives. So those are going to be really cool. That's going to be turned into 2 engines from my local short line. So super looking forward to that. But one day they'll be done. One day.
Famous last words.
It's been 84 years.
Exactly.
So for myself, I don't have any potential Blunami targets, but I'll just go back to that Concord Pioneer Zephyr that I'm still working on getting DCC installed. That's all I have to say on that one.
I had to ask.
Yeah.
On that topic, because this is one that actually pertains to an upgrade I'm doing for a customer, George, what would you recommend for an engine that has like a Winton engine like the Pioneer Zephyr? What sound decoder would you recommend? Because I've got one that has a similar prime mover that I need to do.
So the Winton was a predecessor to the EMD 567s. It ran on, I think it was like petroleum distillate or something like that, as opposed to straight diesel. There's not any running. So there's no recording of it. If anybody claims they have a recording, they've synthesized it off of something. You can actually, on occasion, you can go back and find footage of sometimes where there's audio in, but you have to be careful with the older stuff because sometimes the silent videos aren't as interesting to watch as ones with sound, and so they'll pump or make sounds in it. So you have to be careful with that. But I forget, it was somebody sent me, this was years ago, a newsreel that was like a news broadcast at the time in like the 40s or something like that. And they had the Zephyr or one of those things running in the background. And so it kind of gave you an idea of what it sounded like. But it's nowhere near enough audio to either A, make a decoder of it, and B, be able to authority say that this is the exact recording, because who knows, that very well could have been pumped in too. So with that being said, there's none to record, and so there's not really any that people can compare to. So it's kind of a little modeler's license in that case. We have a Whitcomb, which is another similar light diesel that you could very easily use as a substitute, and that lives on our Baldwin and Others flavors. But there's also kind of like I said, a little modeler's license. You can go in and pick some of the light diesels. You've got the Cummins and Caterpillars on the GE. You've got that Whitcomb. You've got a Fairbanks Morse, which, yeah, that's probably a little heavier, but it would gives you sound. Or because of its GM lineage, you could even go so far as to use a 12-cylinder or an 8-cylinder 567 and kind of cut some of the lower frequencies out. to kind of give you an idea. So it really is modeler's license in this case, because there isn't one to record. There's no real comparison. And so at least nothing I've found anyway. And I'm always open to entertain the idea if somebody says, oh, well, I have a perfect recording of a Witten. What the hell's wrong with you? You know, whatever the case is, I'm always open to listen to it, of course. But that's kind of how I would approach it, is kind of decide what you want that locomotive to sound like. In this case, the Zephyr, you would think, would be more of like a streamlined, and so it wouldn't have that lopey blah 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 blah. So you may decide to go something more like the 8-cylinder 567, because it is a little bit more of a even kind of a low tone diesel, but not the 16-cylinder that you would hear in like an F7 or a GP7 or whatever. That's kind of the approach I would do with it. And anything else like that, you kind of take the approach. And never have I once had anybody not want to run a model that made noise because, oh, well, this is a Baldwin and I'm hearing an Alco. That's it. I'm leaving this op session. You know, it's, you know, they're in the end, they're simulations of the real thing. And so we try to get as close as we can. And in this particular case, because there's no source material, we have to do what we can.
Awesome answer.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a fantastic answer. Oh my gosh.
All the information we needed.
Genuinely learned something.
I didn't even know what it was supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, oh, isn't it just a diesel? You know, I'm not a diesel person, so I just had no idea. That was amazing.
Yeah. I usually default to like weird Baldwin or something for some unknown diesel. I'll throw a Baldwin motor in it, you know? That's great.
Yeah. And, you know, having been doing this for years, I was so funny. I had a friend of mine a few years ago. This was probably 2 or 3 years ago. He told me, he says, your GE engine sounds so fantastic. Can you make mine sound that way? So I said, yeah, all right. But honestly, we were at a show. So he went off and he was working another booth. And so I played with it and he came back over and we listened to it. He said, that's awesome. What'd you do? And I said, it's not the 16-cylinder GE that you thought it was. I picked this one. He goes, oh, I knew you were going to do that, but man, it sounds so good. And so he kept it. And it's the hardest thing about all of this is that we're trying to simulate a real world sound coming out of a small speaker. Now with O-scale, you guys have a much better low frequency response. So we're going to get more of that, but you're still limited. You're still not getting the entire spectrum. And even though we load the decoder with the full sound spectrum, your speaker's your gateway. It's going to be your limitations of what you can and can't hear. And so, especially with the smaller HO or even N scale, when you're talking about a speaker that's the size of your pinky nail, you can't possibly expect to hear all the small idiosyncrasies of every single diesel engine. You'll hear the flavor of it, but you may not hear every little thing. So at some point, modeler's license has got to kick in. And well, you know, it's close enough. And I mean, I can go out also with recordings. And let's say, for example, a GP38, which has a 645 turbo, non-turbo, I can record the same locomotive with the same mic in 3 different positions and then sell it to you as 3 different recordings. We remember back when we were kids, we were watching cartoons. Well, what was thunder? Well, they certainly didn't go out and record real thunder. They hit a giant piece of sheet metal and power suggestion told our brains that was thunder. And so that's where, you know, you can get obsessive with the sound, and we've got the tools to do that. But in the end, you're already creating a simulation. And so we're trying to make it as best as we can with that.
Looking to expand your collection? Check out Trains.com. Trains is your go-to place for new and used model railroad products. They have everything ranging from engines, rolling stock, parts, track, and scenery. If you need it, they probably have it. With new discounts being added daily, you'll be sure to find something you like. Plus, Trains offers a newsletter which keeps you up to date on new items, discounts, and upcoming promotions. We've been using Trains for years, and we highly recommend their stellar service. What's really cool is you can also collect points by buying Trains and using them on future purchases. With their awesome rewards program, you can earn points on every purchase that you can use for future discounts. Dedicated modelers can also join their private card membership to get exclusive access to new listings, earn 5 points per dollar spent, and unlock great benefits like no questions asked returns. Trains not only sells trains, but also buys them too. If you got a large collection or are interested in downsizing and making some cash, you can head on over to sellmytrains.com. It doesn't get easier than that. You can find them using our affiliate link, www.trains.com/MMOP, or if you want to use our one-time promo code code MMOP, you can get $10 off a single purchase on the Trains.com website. So check out Trains.com and start expanding your collection today.
So, George, before we go any further on this, I think it's important that we inform our listeners kind of some additional details on Blunami and DCC. So, because obviously the majority of our listeners are O-scalers, they're used to TMCC and Legacy and DCS. You've told me you're the DCC guru, so I'm going to have to put you on the spot. And if you can explain maybe at a high level what DCC is to our listeners.
Okay. Well, DCC stands for Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. And so my reference for that joke is I was scrolling through the television guide this was several years back. And on one of the channels, I saw something like DCC making the grade. I was like, that can't possibly be. So I clicked on it, and it was the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders tryouts. And so ever since then, I've used that joke, and I think it's funny. But no, so DCC stands for Digital Command Control. And this is a National Model Railroad Association, the NMRA, agreed to standard. And basically, without diving too deep into it, it's basically a series of ones and zeros that are transmitted along the rails through the DC, the dual wave DC signal. And those ones and zeros are interpreted as commands for the decoders to follow. And basically, it's following a specific pattern. So when you're talking about NMRA DCC versus something like TMCC or even the MTH, what do they call it, DCS or whatever, they're all very similar products. They're all putting basically this digital signal on the rail, and the ones and zeros are coded in specific patterns for that information to be transmitted. The difference is the decoder ring, aka what my decoder interprets versus a TMCC versus a DCS, are different. And so that way, when the NMRA DCC command is being broadcast out on the rails, my decoder gets the information and interprets the code correctly to get the message, eat more Ovaltine.
A crummy commercial.
Come on, it's a Christmas Story joke. It's a Christmas Story reference. but it's relevant because the ones and zeros are organized in a specific pattern. And so when you talk about NMRA DCC, it may be very similar to DCS, but the coding's different. And so you may not get the proper message. So if I take a DCC decoder and put it on a DCS system, it's just going to sit there. It's going to power up, but it's going to be dumb because it doesn't know what to do because it has no idea the message is garbled. Yep. And the same thing with TMCC. And so that's where the difference comes into play. Now, the Blue Moon event happened in the 90s when all these different companies were making a whole bunch of different command control stations, but they were all proprietary. Dynatrol was out there. Then you had CTC 80, and you had a couple of others. There was Rail Command, and all these different companies made these proprietary stuff. And as you know, the majority of our hobbyists tend to be older. And so these are engineers that have retired or still working at some big engineering company, decided to do this as a side gig. And so what would happen is, let's say, and I'm making this up, so don't read any more into it, but let's say the Dynatrol guy passed away. Well, nobody can go in and decipher the code, so the company dies. Now all your stuff's obsolete. You can no longer expand. You can no longer do anything with it. And until it breaks, you're stuck with Dynatrol, or you make the big, heavy investment to now buy Rail Command. And then if Rail Command went out of business, then now you're stuck doing it again. So the NMRA kind of got a bunch of companies together to agree on a standard. And that standard, people hear about the NMRA DCC standard, and they say, well, what's standard? Well, the only standard applies to the signal on the rails. The ones and zeros are organized in a specific pattern to transmit the information. How that signal is generated is up to the system manufacturers. How that signal is translated is up to the manufacturers, the decoders like Soundtraxx. And so this is where we came in and said, we're going to do sound. We're going to be the sound company. And so we started our company actually in 89. And so officially our first show was Amherst in January of 1990. So this year we're actually celebrating 35 years of company, but the NMRA DCC came in and we started right away with it. We were part of that original conversation, and all of our products are DCC compatible. And so that's kind of what it is. And so basically the signal that's transmitted tells the decoder what to do without getting too elevated into the nuts and bolts of it. We have a webinar series on our YouTube channel, and webinar 4 teaches you all about the nuts and bolts of DCC, all the components, and actually what the signal is transmitting, because that's what's going to help people diagnose if their decoder's doing or not doing something they think it's supposed to do. And so that we can really dive into that, and that can be a whole half-hour conversation. So I'll refer you to that webinar series if you're really interested. But basically the standard is the signal on the rails and everybody follows it. So let's, for argument's sake, say Soundtraxx goes out tomorrow, which we're not. But if we were, you're not stuck with all of our stuff. You can still go out and buy other brands of stuff and vice versa. So like if NCE went out of business and their DCC systems were no longer there, well, it doesn't mean the system's obsolete. I can still buy decoders from Digitrax or Soundtraxx or whoever to run on the same system. And that's where the appeal of the NMRA DCC standard came into play. But if it doesn't say DCC, it's actually following a similar protocol, but it's their own protocol, because the NMRA DCC is actually a patented signal that's owned by the NMRA.
I guess that said, I think you can chime in on this too. It's really interesting to see how all this came together for DCC, and then how we have everything in 3-rail now. It's very much not that.
Yeah, so it's funny because our major 3-rail control systems didn't come into play until mid 90s, early 2000s, and it's a mix of, it is just a bunch of ones and zeros. We have motherboards, decoders that decipher whatever's being sent to them. Lionel, you connect your base to the rails and uses the rails as a distribution block, and then the engine has an antenna in it, so it's through radio. And then DCS is much more similar, where it's all through the rails, no radio involved. But again, they're proprietary. They're their own thing. You can't control a DCS equipped or Protosound equipped engine with Legacy or TMCC and vice versa. And it's definitely sort of polarized the running of our trains. It's very one or the other, and you have to have both. And for the past 10 years or so, it's definitely resulted in, when your MTH engine falls apart and stops working, or your Lionel engine stops working, you either have to put one of the two systems in, and those systems are very limiting because of just the way they are, the sounds, and the controls. MTH has a little more leeway with the sound. You can change things. Lionel has been known for very crisp audio in past, and maybe not so much now, and just very good speed control. But it's just been very polarizing. You're one or the other. You're strictly limited to the systems unless you fully go to something else. But if you fully go to something else, that sort of restricts you in sort of a social way, because if like your friends come over, they can't put their trains on your tracks and have them run properly, which actually kind of ties into our next thing of why we haven't really had DCC in 3-rail, and Blunami has definitely fixed that.
Actually, do you want to dive into that, Sid, and kind of explain why? I think you'd be the best person for this, for why we haven't had DCC as something in 3-rail for a while.
So since about the 19 teens with Lionel trains, even before 3-rail O-scale, they've been powered via AC track power, which is fine. They had AC open frame motors, and then as time went on in the late 70s, early 80s, they transitioned to using DC CAN motors, and we have ways to rectify AC track power, bridge rectifiers and capacitors and all kinds of things, which is fine. But the DCC standard isn't like a pure sine wave AC track power. And so over the years, there has been compatibility. Like you can set certain 3-rail models onto a DCC powered track and they'll be fine, but there's also some that can't handle that. And so it results in their electronics going bad or shorting and things of that nature. And so because of there being a lack of standardization and not a good compatibility there, we've been limited to what we can do with DCC. If you want DCC and 3-rail, you have to go full DCC and convert your Lionel engines over to some DCC decoder. Fortunately, PS3 MTH models can be run off of the DCC protocol, and they're fine. But obviously, PS3 has only been around since around 2010. And there's plenty of amazing models from MTH and, of course, Lionel prior to that, and all these brass models and things like that. So we've really been limited. And Blunami is now changing that because you're not required to use DCC to control it and send those ones and zeros to the decoder and then have it respond. And obviously there's a lot of explanation behind what Blunami is. We're going to obviously talk about that, but the fact that we can now, through some methods, have DCC in our models and run them side by side with our older models is just amazing.
Yeah, Sid, on that topic, I've expressed this with you guys before, but it's kind of funny how, like you said, before we had just proprietary stuff and we didn't really have any other option. We were beholden to the manufacturers of these trains, what we could put in. You know, you had ERR and stuff, so you could kind of put something in there. But it's really given us this, like, and it's kind of a weird, like, concept, but it's almost by giving us the power to put these things into, you know, these older engines or these dead locomotives that we've had that have gone. It's almost created this third manufacturer through the community where we've kind of become, you know, this third party that's like, oh, well, now I can put this in this engine. I have this engine that I like from this one company, but, you know, even if it's not dead yet, you know, you can go, hey, I kind of want this. This wants to, I want this to be my traveling engine, you know, like, again, we'll get into it more later, but the ability to take something that you have, and I should preface this whole show with, I'm very much the layperson here when it comes to technical stuff and DCC. Sid, Johnny, and Matt have a much bigger and better understanding, I think, just from having more hands-on experience with it. So I'm kind of playing the role of the lay guy here. But from what I've interacted with it and from what they've taught me about, this is such a big deal. I don't think people realize how big a deal this is for our hobby, specifically in O scale. Like, we're the only scale that has not had this wonderful freedom of, you know, G and HO and N, where you have this universal, you know, compatibility for the most part across pretty much everybody. Even, you know, older models you can retrofit with this stuff. You know, and so, like you said, we had that period in the 90s where, you know, everything was kind of coming into form and people were kind of getting a feel for what people wanted and what the market wanted, and the market almost didn't even know what it wanted yet. But now that we're coming into this, like, third new era of technology, we've almost, like, brought a lot of these, specifically the brass market too. Brass was always kind of in this corner of looks pretty, but it's going to sit in your roundhouse forever because it runs horribly. So we've almost, like, zombified brass as this new thing coming around, and it's almost had a rediscovery and a rebirth. So I'm so excited for this, just for our hobby. It's a great thing. Like, it's the most excited I've ever been about just O scale in general and what it means for the community. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it's honestly one of the best things that we've had ever. Like I said, I think this is a whole new thing. Like, this is a new era for us as O scalers.
Yeah, for sure.
There hasn't been a shakeup in the 3-rail and just O scale in general since, like, in my eyes, the creation of Lionel Vision Line, when some pretty complicated features and things that you'd never seen before came into play. But since then, it's sort of just died off. Yeah, they put it in everything, but that's the thing. It's in everything. It's also very proprietary. And so you as the consumer are tied to them for that. And it's not really special in any way anymore. And so, and there's also so much more. Johnny was telling me it was probably at least a year about DCC and just the advantages of it, because my exposure to it was very, very basic. I had run some HO models with just control, no sounds, nothing like that. The control is very impressive and is very nice, but for us in 3-rail specifically, the younger population definitely loves customization and sounds, which DCC sounds in general have always been at the same level and above what any of the 3-rail proprietary systems have, unless you customize something like an MTH model. But even then, that's still customization. It's not out of the box.
For sure.
Real quick, again, just from layperson terms, what is the technical term for what the TIU or the legacy base are? Are they? Would you call them the interface, or what is that technical term for that device in terms of command control systems in O-scale?
They're what's transmitting all of that.
Yeah,
that's kind of they're the hub, they're the transmitter. Yeah.
The fact we can circumnavigate that now with Blunami is, I think, if it's not the biggest proponent of it, it's one of them. That is such a huge thing, that you can take an engine over to a friend's house and not have to worry about what they run. You can have conventional control on it and your stuff will still run great. That is such a huge deal for me.
For sure. And this kind of, so we can throw the mic back over to George here. It's one of those things where with Legacy and with DCS and with DCC, you need to have a base or a hub to transmit those signals through the rails. And that's something that's been a challenge to do with the way that 3-rail works. Because not all engines will play nice with that additional DCC signal on top of Legacy and on top of DCS. So to go back into the product more for folks who aren't aware of the Blunami product, George, what is the difference between your normal Tsunami 2 decoders versus a Blunami decoder, and what advantages do you get using a Blunami decoder when it comes to 3-rail?
Oh man, if we're talking advantages, I don't think we can keep this into a short podcast. I'm just kidding.
It is a pretty long list.
But so the reason this is revolutionary is because the Blunami, the difference between Tsunami 2, which is our flagship product and has been for, since 2006, it's the flagship. Tsunami was named because it was a wave of change. It was the first 16-bit digital sound system in model trains where you could actually hear the nuances between all the different prime movers, kind of like what we were talking about in steam whistles and so forth. And so this is Tsunami 2 is our second generation of that product, which is what we're selling right now. But then Blunami takes the Tsunami 2 and adds a Bluetooth chip. And the Bluetooth chip is transmitting back and forth with your smart device, i.e. your phone or your tablet, whether you're Apple or Android, whatever the case is. And it's got that paired communication that's talking only to your device. And what it does is it allows us to now use our phone as a wireless throttle, so that way, basically now you're not limited to either, like you were talking about, you're either TMCC or DCS or whatever, and then you can't back and forth. Well, now all you need to do is power the decoder up. In my case, with the Blunami decoder, you just need to send it power. And once it's powered up, all the commands and everything come from the app. So you have a free app that you download to your smart device, you connect to the locomotive, and there's your throttle. And it basically is your DCC system. So the app will send all your DCC commands through that paired communication protocol. So we could have, especially in today's world, where there's the world of mass-produced models, where everybody goes out and gets their SPGS4 4449, or everybody goes and gets that. Oh, what's that big locomotive that's based out of Cheyenne? I can't think of it right now. Everybody has those models of the big boys or the whatever it is. And when you go to a DCC layout, or even I would imagine in a TMCC or whatever, if you have the same address or the same number on your locomotive decoder, they're all going to behave the same, because they can't differentiate that. Well, wait, I want to talk to mine instead of I want to talk to my big boy instead of Johnny's big boy, or whatever the case is. But the Blunami, because it's paired, once I'm paired to it through my Bluetooth connection, you can't see it. You won't even see it on your phone. If you haven't already detected it, you won't even see it. But even if you had detected it, it will no longer connect because I'm already paired. And so that way I don't have to worry about it. I can run 6 4014 big boys, even in the same device, because those communication are going to be sent to each locomotive individually. I just need to know which one I'm talking to when I'm actually running the app. But for the most part, that Bluetooth connection allows a wireless throttle that everybody has smartphones nowadays in their pocket or your tablet. And I want to talk about the Bluetooth connection, because most people are used to, when I talk about Bluetooth, they're used to their headphones, which has about a 30-foot range, or 10 meters or whatever they say. And this is actually using a slightly different protocol that's primarily designed for data transfer. And this is called Bluetooth Low Energy. And if anybody has a smartwatch or a Fitbit or any of those type of devices that are paired to your phone, that's the same protocol we're using. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, we're taking advantage of this advanced technology that's out there, and we're broadcasting the DCC signal through that paired communications. And so when we talk about range, most people are used to their headphones, and so they say, well, I need longer range than that. Well, Bluetooth Low Energy actually will take you up to about 150 foot. So as Soundtraxx, we advertise up to 100 feet, because then you have a cushion to factor in things like, for example, if you're running through a tunnel that's all chicken wire that's grounded in kind of a pseudo Faraday box, you may lose a few feet, but you're still nowhere near the 100-foot range. And so, I have a YouTube video where I did a range test and I went 147 foot. Now, granted, I was clear line of sight and I was using a G-scale USA Trains plastic model, but 147 feet. Now, when I took that extra step, I lost my connection. And when I took the step back, boop, I was connected again. So you have an amazing range. You have a free wireless throttle in your pocket, which is one of the other things when you buy these other systems. Even if you are DCC, you have a $250 or $300 wireless throttle that now has a whole bunch of buttons on it that either don't make sense or they're not necessarily intuitive. So you have to hit shifts and pounds and all this other stuff to get to the higher access. Whereas the Blunami app is actually well laid out and easy to understand, but it's a free wireless throttle in your pocket. And so there's no downside to it.
You made a lot of really good points there, and things that I've personally experienced as well, utilizing Blunami in my layout and the club layout. Yeah. Such an underrated feature, I think, is the lockout. When I connect to a train on my layout, Sid can't connect to it and take it over. And if you think about it, it's think of it this way. Like, let's say you're a club and you're displaying at York or Amherst or Trainfest, for example, and you are running your Blunami locomotive. For example, let's say this was a Lionel product and I was running it using the Line Chief app or any legacy engine. There's nothing stopping someone from the general public. Now, if this is for demonstration, you want them to run the train, then that's one thing. Obviously, it's easy for them to connect and just get up and go. It's great for demonstration purposes there. But the disadvantage is that anyone can just go in and connect to your engine and just run it. So you have rogue train syndrome. And with Blunami, you have the ability to, once you're connected, you are in control. So there's no risk of someone, whether it be a fellow club member or someone from the general public, just hijacking your train and wreaking havoc. So it's a really cool little feature there. Granted, I think, George, when you were here in Chicago, we were joking about this. It does mean that if a older club member who cannot hear the frequency which the bell plays at and leaves it on for hours on end, and you cannot take it over to turn it off, which we've dubbed the boomer bell, that you have that risk happening. But realistically, having that lockout is really important for shows like that. And then kind of just, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say absolutely. And to your point, this was interesting. I had a customer come up to me and we had announced it and it hadn't even been like 3 months. He's at a show and he said, well, my club's banned out Blunami. And I was like, okay, this ought to be good. Tell me why. And he said, well, they were having all kinds of interference with the radio throttles. I went, okay, well, first off, the Bluetooth communication protocol isn't constantly broadcasting. It literally sends a short snippet of information, like half a second, and then turns off. But because the way the data is transferred, it's paired, so the decoders wake up when the new command is coming, and listen to the paired device. So it's not a constant broadcast. So, but then I was like, okay, well, maybe in that short little bit, I mean, it is a radio after all, it's radio frequency. But then I started asking them questions. I said, so where were you at when this happened? Well, we were set up at a show. And, oh, you were at a show. Okay. And what's DCC system you use? Oh, we were using NCE. I said, oh, okay, which is North Coast Engineering. And then I said, well, were there any other clubs around you? And he says, yeah, there was another one right next to us. So what were they using? NCE. I said, were they using wireless throttles? Yes. I said, so it couldn't have been those folks. It had to be the one Blunami that you put on the rails. Because the thing about the NCE radio throttles, and this is going to speak to the Blunami app as well, is when you go with the NCE radio throttles, you only have a dedicated number of channels the NCE will follow. Same with Digitrax and so forth. But if you only have, let's say for argument's sake, and I don't remember what the number is exactly, but let's say you have 8 channels on the NCE wireless, that you can only have 8 wireless throttles operating at any one time. Well, if you've got another wireless club next to you with another 8 throttles, well, if they're sharing the same frequencies, you're going to have that interference. And I said, I tell you what, I said, you see that watch on your hand? He says, yeah. I said, that's a Apple Watch. He goes, yep. I said, that's the same protocol as our Blunami. So if you guys are going to ban Blunami, you have to ban your watches too, because that's the same communication protocol. He said, huh. Well, I'll tell them, and I have no idea if they ever did or didn't, but this was early in its infancy, and model railroaders tend to be reluctant to change, and so they'll find every excuse not to accept the new technology.
New thing, bad.
Which is right, which is why it's refreshing to be here with you guys, because you guys are like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Which
it really is. I gotta be honest.
And so from that perspective, it's wonderful. It's refreshing to me because I'm, as I talk to you guys there, I'm on board 100%. My whole layout at home is all Blunami. If it's not Blunami, it doesn't even run on the layout anymore, because I can run it with my phone. I can run it with either the Wii throttle or the JMRI throttle or what Android engine driver, or I can use a DCC throttle. And when people come over, I let them pick. I have all 3 access on my layout. And now, to be fair, the JMRI throttle is not the actual JMRI program. It's one of those Wi-Fi tracks, Wi-Fi modules that's just plugged into the loco bus, and it just becomes another throttle. But I've yet to have anybody use that over the Blunami app. So
the app is really great. And I think another thing that I want to touch on was, as a person, so I've delved into N-Scale as of recent, being a 3-railer for my entire life. And when I learned DCC for the first time, as a person who's only known DCS, who's only known Legacy and TMCC, learning DCC things such as CV values and such like that, that was a major hurdle to get over if it wasn't for the Blunami app. You guys format your app very well, and the fact you can make those changes to those configuration variables instantly, and your navigation panels are great. And the biggest advantage, I think, after having to learn DCC the traditional way, is you have, through the Blunami app, you have your function panel. Everything is labeled for you. There is no memorizing of FX6 turns on or off the prime mover, or number 1 is headlight, number 2 is bell, 3 is whistle, or whatever. You don't have to learn that. You can just jump in, see what things are, tap on them, and then if you need to configure your decoder, which you will if it's a brand new install for 3-rail, you will get your engine up and running within seconds. Or if you maybe spend maybe like 10 minutes, you already have all your horns and bells and your whistles and all that, your prime movers, your chuffs, everything. All that is set within minutes, and there's no huge learning curve as if you were to, for example, buy a product with a traditional DCC controller and have to have that paper next to you saying, okay, what button does this? Like, Matt, or I know, I remember when when you switched to HO, I was like, I know what button does the horn, and I know how to make the throttle move, and those are the only buttons I'm touching.
That right there is just like the selling point, and it's what impresses people the most. So at York, this past weekend, I delivered a Blunami conversion to somebody, and we were running it around on a friend's layout. And what was impressing him and his fellow like club members, they're from a club up in Detroit, when I would be running the engine and I could go from having a Nathan 6 chime and then go to an N&W Hooter within seconds, or I was running our Alco PA that has Blunami in it for the podcast diesel. I go from whatever horn we have it set to the Auga horn or a car horn, and it just, everyone loved that, and it applies to everything, you know, the prime mover, the bell, you know, literally everything. And so, as a consumer looking to get into this, as Johnny was saying, it's just that simple. It's like just a few minutes and you have everything you want. And scanning the CVs doesn't take very long, and adjusting them isn't typing in a bunch of numbers. It's just going to a menu, tapping on, you know, an icon and adjusting that menu to whatever you want.
Exactly. And I want to chime in here because we kind of jumped a little bit, because CV isn't necessarily a term most people are used to hearing. And I know Johnny defined it as configuration variable, but what does that mean? And this kind of speaks to the complexity, or I should say perceived complexity of DCC, because that's not a normal term people use in their normal day-to-day life. I mean, John, if you talk about, you know, you're the layperson here, when you're adjusting the volume on your television, you're not thinking to yourself, oh, I got to go adjust the volume CV, right?
Exactly.
But that's what you're doing. And so CV configuration variable basically is the way to adjust the decoder's behavior and or performance. So to use the definition to kind of define it here, or to use the term to define a little bit, is a CV, a configuration variable, allows you as the user to vary or to change the configuration or the setup of the decoder. And that's where, you know, like Sid was talking about, when you're adjusting the different air horns or whistles on your steam locomotives, you're changing a configuration variable because you're telling the decoder, I want to use this Nathan 5 chime, or I want to use the Auga air horn, or I want to use whatever, you know, you're making those choices. But to do it, you have to configure a CV. And there's some CVs that are just like, you know, selecting the air horn, a value from 0 to 44 determines which air horn plays. But if I want to go in and adjust the volume, my volume range is 0 to 255, which is 0 to 100%. But some of the configuration variables, such as, and I will stay on diesels for the moment, but like if I want to go in and adjust the prime mover notching rate and X number of speed steps transitions the diesel engine up and down, or if I wanted to start up or shut down or start up automatically or start up or based on, you know, my use of the decoder, those are all parts of a configuration variable that each section and each value determines the performance of the decoder in a different way. And that's where people get tripped up a lot, because they have to do this CV bit math and they have to add, well, 2 plus 6 or 2 plus 16 plus 28 or 128. I mean, you start adding these numbers up and you're like, oh my God, this is complicated, but it really isn't. You're just making selections, but because you're doing the CV bit math is what makes it appear to be difficult. And that's where the Blunami app shines, because it takes all that hard stuff, puts it behind the scenes of the clean user interface on your phone or your tablet. And that's where the information comes from. So you go through and you select through the list which air horn that you want. You just click it, and it behind the scenes, it's changed the configuration variable. You just don't know it because you're clicking it through the menus in the app. And that's where it makes it more user friendly, because Johnny, you even talked about when you were having DCC, give me the horn and the bell and the headlight, and that's it. I'm afraid to touch anything else. And that's very true of our entire hobby in the industry, because a model railroader, not knowing the digital side of it, they've limited their enjoyment or limited the amount of what they want to do, because they're afraid they're going to break something, or they're afraid they're going to change something inadvertently that's going to cause the decoder to break out. And it's like, and I understand that, because once upon a time, my personal story, when I bought my first DCC system, I read the book and started looking at it and going, oh dear God, what did I do? I got scared and put it in my closet and looked at it for 2 years before I actually took it out and relearned it. And so I understand that apprehension, but these, many folks limit how much they use the decoder because they're afraid of doing something else that they don't know. And there's so many benefits of using our decoder, whether it's sound volume adjustments. I know we're going to talk about equalizers and reverb and, sound selections and everything to really get the most out of the decoder to your liking, that a lot of people tend to be afraid because they get inhibited by the term configuration variable, because like I said, they're not computer guys. And so it's a perfect point to make. And so that's why I wanted to define what it is that you're doing with a CV.
Want to support your favorite O-Scale podcast and rock some awesome merch? Well, now you can. We've teamed up with redbubble.com and have come up with a great selection of gear that you can get right now. They have everything from shirts, hoodies, stickers, mugs, bags, you name it. Heck, you could even get a wall clock with us on it. All this great stuff and more at redbubble.com. Links are down in the show notes, so grab yourself some gear and rock some awesome podcast merch.
It's a huge user friendliness aspect, and you just said equalizer menu there. I mean, I know Sid loves the equalizer menu. That is just
I love the equalizer. The whole product of Blunami has brought so many things that we as three railers never expected or could even think of, because we were so stuck with the systems we had and the companies that make these systems and put them in their trains. In past, we're not really looking to change. Some of them aren't willing to change. Others have expressed interest in changing and looking at ways to better their products. But the fact that now we have a product that can be put in just about everything from the modern era and has all these amazing features is just great. And there's a whole assortment of things that it includes, the equalizer and all these sounds we were talking about. They're all built in. What is it, like 90 whistles? George, you know the stats. You at that the thing in Chicago, you like went down the list of all the things that are available.
So for a steam, real quick, it's 90 whistles, 54 bell recordings, 10 exhaust chuffs, 10 air compressors, 8 dynamos. You've got 4 different fuel types. You can pick a lifting, non-lifting injector, power reverse manual, Johnson bar. You can do an articulated exhaust with and without wheel slip. And in this case, the wheel slip is the sound of the drivers going in and out of sync with each other, and different coupler sounds and everything else that you can choose. That I sat down and I thought to myself, how many possible sound combinations, not counting volume, do I have just in my Steam decoder alone? And I came up with 2.1 billion.
And Lionel thinks they're special with 5 horns and 5 whistles. Okay.
Well, to be fair, the bell kind of is just the same bell at different pitches, isn't it? So it's really one bell.
It is just the same bell. So I guess in that case, it's 5 whistles and then 1 bell. But the fact that you have all this in a single decoder and you can change the parameters on the fly makes it just fantastic. And those are just the sounds. There's also all these operating aspects of it that I know Johnny loves, because it's allowed us to not only be immersive with the sounds, but have those sounds be part of the way the train is actually operating and how you're interfacing with it.
For sure. And Matt R., you've been experiencing a lot of this with DCC. You have quite a lot of Tsunami 2 equipped locomotives in your fleet.
I do. I believe, and I don't have an accurate count here, but I think at least half of my collection at least U.S. engines are definitely Tsunami 2. I absolutely love the product. It sounds fantastic. I have a lot of Athearn products, Genesis engines, and obviously, they put really nice speakers in those. But I think that the sound fidelity on the sound decoder, just like, and I'm not joking when I say this, like I have Athearn diesel engines that are louder than some of my O scale engines, and I'm not even joking there. Like, and they sound utterly fantastic. So that's that. I mean, that says a lot, when you have this small little half O scale engine and you're getting these just gigantic sounds coming from it.
I believe it, because I like this just speaks to DCC in general and just these decoders from all manufacturers. But I was at York and I was in one of the halls and there was a little HO layout in the back, and I heard a horn and something else, and I saw the guy was talking to someone. He said, "Oh, that's a Soundtraxx decoder," and I was listening, and right next to it was an O scale layout with like I think a legacy diesel, and I heard the HO diesel more than I did the legacy diesel, and so it really is amazing the fact you can get that much volume and power out of a smaller engine in HO, and then apply that to O. It's even more crazy. I have this Norfolk and Western Water Buffalo Mountain type, and if I turn up the volume on it, it's just throwing you back. The chuffs are so loud, the hooter is so like it'll hurt your ears. It's really loud. Like I keep it at like maybe 50%, probably lower than that most of the time.
Yeah, same.
I have a really quick question. I don't want to derail us too much, but I'm really curious on what the catalyst was for the creation of Blunami. And what goes in my head is like that old Reese's peanut butter commercial where they're kind of like two guys. One guy's got peanut butter, the other guy's like chocolate, and they bump into each other. Was it like one guy walking down the hall with a 3-wheel engine, another guy with a Tsunami 2 decoder? They have Bluetooth headphones on. They crash into each other, and then hey, we got a 3-rail Blunami engine. I'm sure that obviously I'm having fun here, but I don't know, George, can you just tell us like what was the catalyst for the creation of that product?
Well, there was a few different things that kind of went into it. Obviously wanting to be, for the leader in the industry. We were kind of talking about it. We saw this company, Blue Rail Trains, had their Blue Rail app where they were running a motor decoder. And we kind of decided, hey, this would be a great partnership because we can take advantage of modern technology with the Bluetooth communication and be able to get the best out of our sound decoders as well. Because over the years, we know one of the more complicated parts of DCC is, as we've talked about, setting CVs and adjustments and things like that. And over the years, there's been a lot of reluctance, for whatever reason, the O scale, even the 2-rail and certainly the 3-rail. I feel like the 3-rail turned out to be the redheaded stepchild of digital sound systems, where you had to kind of create a lot to make it work. And so this is a perfect product for it. But anyway, it kind of was like, let's open this up, because even in the large scales, like G scale and so forth, people had to buy expensive third-party things to make our sound systems work for their outdoor trains. They would have to buy not only the decoder and the speaker, maybe a battery if they wanted to go dead rail, but then they would have to buy the third-party wireless throttle, the third-party receiver, which received that command, turned it into a digital command station or command, and sent it to the decoder to now trigger the sound effects, the lighting effects, the motor, and so forth. And so we really saw this as a great opportunity. But having partnered with a company called Blue Rail Trains, who had their initial app that was available, it was a new adventure because we've never really partnered with third party before. So it took a little longer to bring to market than I think we wanted. We were able to get it working fairly quick, but then there's all the legalese and who owns what and how does all this work together, partner, how do they each other get paid, et cetera, et cetera. And so that all had to be worked out. And so in the summer of 23, I think it was 22, summer of 22 is when we announced it, because it'll turn 3 years old this summer. Is when we first announced it. And again, you talk about unintended markets. The Lego guys came over and they were buying 10 of them at a time, because here's somebody who's really been, I mean, we talk about the O-scale 3-rail being the redheaded stepchild of digital sound systems. The Lego guys were completely ignored. Nobody even thought twice about them. And they come over and it was like, okay, yeah, this works. Just put a battery to it and connect to the app. And they had trains running before the end of the day. The first day of the show. It was
awesome.
amazing.
Awesome.
And so it really opened up a whole lot of markets that we've never thought about, not necessarily because we were ignoring them, but because, kind of like you said, the TMCC and Lionel and the DCS and those guys kind of cornered it, and they were selling it all the stuff with it already built in. So there wasn't a huge aftermarket installation market. And so, like I said, it was just kind of this thing. And when we started playing with it, and especially in my opinion, once we got the consisting where we can run multiple trains together through the app, that was the turning point. It was like, this, we can't go back. We have to keep doing this and pushing this product, because that's the biggest thing. You know, people are afraid to do settings like we talked about. People are afraid to run multiple trains. And so with digital systems, DCC, they'll set them all to the same address and just run them nose to tail, elephant style. And then they're going in and turning horns and bells off on the trailing units because they didn't learn the method of actual consisting through DCC. And so this actually makes that so much easier and better in general. And so there, like I hate to keep saying it, but there's really no downside to this. And that's kind of where the catalyst came from, was we saw this product out there and said, hey, we can really do this, but we didn't have app developers in hand. And so we decided, that's why we partnered, because we didn't have any engineers here who built an app, and they have one that's working, proof of concept.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think there is like really any downside if you're comparing it to just about anything else. And I do want to say something for our listeners who are in 3-rail O scale and have AC track power. Blunami decoders do not run off of AC track power. We have to rectify the AC track power to be DC. And it's a very simple rectification. You use a bridge rectifier and a capacitor, and if you want to limit the voltage to a constant voltage, you can use a buck converter. If you go to my YouTube channel or other channels, or just search Blunami and 3-rail, you will find videos on how to install it and things like that. And you need a DC motor. There have been people that have put it into AC, but that's not a consistent, you can put it in any AC motored engine. You have to kind of do some things, and there's not a lot of consistency there, but convert it to DC power and have a DC motor, and then you're on your way. But we've been talking about the whole Bluetooth aspect of it, but there are a select group of people, and there's also just people in general who might want the ability to use the Bluetooth side of it. I know the answer, but I might as well ask for the listener is, can you run a Blunami decoder off of the traditional NMRA DCC standard, like run it off of an NCE or something like that?
Oh yeah, it's still a DCC decoder at heart. So it's still a Tsunami 2. And as long as you don't connect to the app, it's a DCC decoder, Tsunami 2, you'll never know the difference. But once you connect to the app, then it basically ignores the DCC track power, because the commands are now coming from the app. So that way you don't have to worry about also somebody, since we threw Sid under the bus earlier, Sid running over and trying to grab everybody's trains. If I'm on the app, then I don't have to worry about Sid grabbing my engine. Because when you're using NMRA DCC, the commands are broadcast to everybody. And there's not always a way to make sure that each throttle is talking to a unique address. So there's times where you can have two throttles set to the same address, which sends competing commands. And when those competing commands are being broadcast, your decoder may look like it's misbehaving because I'm telling it to run at speed step 40 or whatever, but Sid on the other side of the layout may be trying to stop his train. So my locomotive is surging as is his, because they're getting the commands and just doing what it's told. And there's no way to differentiate that DCC command came from my real user, not the other user. It just sees address 4014 or whatever and does what it's told. So that's where this also becomes superior, is because once you connect to the app, everything is isolated to just that communication. So you can still have people running their normal DCC trains on the layout. And if you want to run your Blunami equipped locomotive with your other Tsunami 2 equipped locomotives in a consist, great, do it. Just don't connect to the app and you'll never know the difference.
Looking for something different? Need a gift for a fellow rail fan? Well, folks, look no further. NPL Customs is your source for all railroading decor. Handcrafted, made in the USA, and veteran-owned. Their products made for rail fans, by rail fans. I personally have a set of coasters from them that I absolutely love. Find them on Etsy at NPL Customs and use code MMPodcast at checkout to save 10%. NPL Customs, quality since 2017.
I do want to jump in with another thing. It's a very prevalent question when it comes to three rail, and we discussed this when you were in Chicago. You gave a wonderful answer, and I just want for our listeners to hear this as well. One of the most prevalent out of the two questions that we get when educating folks on Blunami within our communities is when it comes to steam locomotives smoke. And people have been used to synchronized smoke within three rail, and smoke is becoming more prevalent with the smaller scales as the years have gone by. Currently, there isn't a way for synchronized smoke with Blunami, but would there ever be potential for something like that in future?
I never say never. There's always potential for everything. But as of right now, there's not a specific protocol because, again, when this particular decoder family was designed, the Tsunami 2, synchronized smoke wasn't a thing, at least not in the smaller scales. And so there's ways around it. There's ways you can do this. You can internally use a trigger to turn on and off the fan, and then you can use a function button because our 4408, which is the 4 amp decoder, actually can handle up to 300 milliamps of current. But if your heating element draws more than 300 milliamps, then you'd want to use a relay to trigger track power or battery power, whatever, to the heating element. And then your mechanical trigger can trigger the puffing. From a personal standpoint, while I know it's cool and a lot of people use it, I know I have retailers that refuse to install sound or smoke in a lot of their models that they're doing for their customers, because the smoke that we're seeing is oil smoke. And once it goes into the atmosphere, now we're breathing it, and it can't possibly be good long-term health-wise. So he absolutely refuses it. But I know there's various different types out there now. So, going back to the original statement, I'll never say never, but at this moment in time, there's going to be some tinkering and some ways around it. And you guys may have done some of that that I haven't done, but I won't do it on any of my personal units just for that reason.
Yeah, and we talked about it when we were in Chicago, is you as a company at Soundtraxx aren't going to fully retrofit your current technology. You just, if you were going to invest and make a product with it built in, you're going to make a product that has it fully in mind, and it is fully made for it, not just sort of jerry rigging it for the customer, because then that results in possible issues and things of that nature, which is understandable. You want to provide the consumer with a product that makes sense, is usable, and isn't going to have issues. That's something that's just kind of cobbled together would. When you explain that to me, it makes total sense. And personally, I love smoke, and I've installed it in plenty of Blunami engines. Once a steam engine gets past, like, I don't know, 10 speed steps or something, you're not going to really see the puffing anymore. And so having the constant doesn't bother me. I understand why people love it. It's become a staple in the three rail world.
Oh, it's certainly a neat thing to see.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just, and seeing that puffing smoke coming out of a steam engine at slow speeds, it's certainly neat. Don't get me wrong. I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
trying to knock against it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying that the product wasn't originally designed as you said. So,
Yeah. And basically, what I'm going to say to the listeners is, patience will probably result in us getting whatever we desire at some point. As you said, never say never. Um, and it's one little thing. I'm like, truthfully, everything else that it has makes up or is better than just that feature alone. Like that's the thing with 3-rail. Smoke has been this staple and this selling point for a lot of these models. But now that we have the assortment of sounds and the train control itself, that immersion, the immersion that we want and desire, comes from that instead of just the puffing smoke. And we were kind of talking about it earlier, all these control aspects. Johnny, I know you love the throttle control and the braking. Maybe that's something we can talk about a little, is how does that make it just so much better for us in 3-rail?
Yeah, I'll definitely something I want to touch upon, and kind of going on to comparing it to what I said with my experience with trying DCC and HO. I knew, because I didn't know what features were available and I didn't know how to access those features with the traditional DCC controller, I was hesitant to do anything besides basic features besides horn, bell, move, train. But with Blunami and Tsunami products, you have so many different things for immersion. And when we saw your presentation at Display and Storage, you touched upon so many of those aspects. But some of the ones, like for me personally, that I really enjoy are train brake, independent brake, and train brake. The difference between those brakes, the being able to hear the air compressor recharge the brake lines, and the fact there is a difference between the two throttles and how they can control. Or even, like, for example, switching, something that you get from, most manufacturers for their control systems will have a uncoupling sound. MTH has it and Lionel has it. But only MTH has a coupler close sound. Like if you're backing your engine down on a freight train, you hear that the cars slam into each other. The coupler's closed because it's a heavy train and a heavy locomotive hitting a heavy train. And I'd say about 99% of people who use DCS don't know that a coupler close sound exists. But Lionel doesn't even have that sound. But for example, in Tsunami, you do. And it's those little touches that it's not just, let me just open the app and let's make the train go. It's, let me take the app, let me connect to my locomotive and run it as if I was the engineer. Let me hear all those extra sounds and features. That's definitely something I think Soundtraxx and Tsunami and Blunami just excels with compared to anything we have in 3-rail.
Yeah, with our Steam decoder, there's over 50 different sound effects recorded in there that you can play at any time. And there's also an intelligent algorithm with 16 independent sound channels. So sounds don't cut off to play other sounds. Like, for example, there's some sound systems out there where if the air compressor is playing and you go to turn on the bell, the air compressor mysteriously disappears because, well, that sound channel is prioritized for the bell, which is the warning device, and they consider the air compressor a background sound. With 16 channels, we can play pretty much all the sounds that you would hear normally when a locomotive is running, and there's none of that prioritization, but there is multiple uses of sound channels. So like, for example, when this locomotive is sitting still, you're not chuffing, and so that may become a Fireman Fred channel where Fireman Fred goes in and turns wrenches and uses the grease gun or whatever the case is. And so, yeah, to your point, there's a lot of it to make it as much of a simulation as you want. So if you want to be the engineer, you want to use the brakes properly, all that's in there. If you want to just run it around the layout and railfan, all of that's in there, and you can determine how the decoder plays. And a lot of those sounds are interactive, kind of like you said, when you use the brakes more frequently. Well, in the real world, you're depleting the air reservoir. And when the air reservoir gets to a certain level, the air compressor kicks on. And all of that is done through intelligent algorithms running in the background that you as the modeler may not necessarily realize, just assuming it's a random thing. But if you use the brakes more frequently, you're going to hear that compressor, which would be more prototypical.
Yeah, that Johnny, I know you personally loved. Like, I know whenever we're playing with the Blunami stuff, the brakes are one of the main things. Like, that's such, you never realize what's how much, like, how just prototypical and how essential those noises are to proper modeling when you're running with sound, that you don't get that with, like, you don't really hear that with Lionel and MTH very much. But those, like you said, George, those little interactions of the different systems, you have literally built like a locomotive system within this sound, the way it communicates with, that's such, it's not just play sound when hit button because fun. It's literally you're hearing how the engine works or would work prototypically, like the air recharging and the system having to come back online and take the strain off that. It's such an interesting thing. And I mean, that alone is such a critical thing that we've been, again, it's one of those things you don't know you're missing it until you get it, you know?
Yeah.
Can I use that as my new ringtone?
You go right ahead.
I think, like, for example, kind of expanding on this, and George, you know this better than I do, so obviously feel free to cut in when you see fit. But like for me, with train brake, right? Beforehand, I was just a loop runner, and that's fine. If that's what you enjoy, you like just letting your trains run, sit back and have a beer, and go for it. I wanted a little bit more than that. So I didn't run diesels very often. Now my Jeep 9 is my favorite engine to run when I'm at the club layout because we have a bunch of sidings and industries. And when you can configure your train brake, if I use train brake, I can set it where the train not only plays a different sound, but it takes a little bit longer to stop because there's the extra momentum of the weight of the train behind it. So if I kick on train brake, it's not just stop immediately. It's train takes a little bit longer to slow down. You hear the whoosh of the brakes and the train comes to a stop. And then the prime mover kicks up and notches up to recharge airlines. And then it goes back down to idle. And then like, okay, airlines are been charged back up again, can take the train out again. There's that pause. There's a little bit more. It's more than just get up and go. Or with train brake, with independent brake, I can make it so the train stops a little bit faster because it's just brakes on the locomotive. So let's say I'm running at light engine. I can apply the brake. It isn't just the whoosh sound anymore. It's the brake squeal of the brakes clamping onto the wheel and slowing the train down. And when you let go, there's a whoosh of air. It's those dynamic sounds. It does more than just control the sounds. It gives the engine more characteristics that would operate more like an engine. George, in your presentation at Displays, one of the things that really stuck out to me, and that you've done operating sessions on your channel and on the Soundtraxx channel, is the people of railroading, and how that tends to be forgotten about in when it comes to model trains. I think that's something that you do very well. If you don't mind, kind of just touching base on how you do that in your layout with incorporating that with Blunami.
Sure. John, did you want to jump in real quick before I go on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just a quick point to Johnny there to finish off that sort of bit there. Another big thing, Johnny, you and I know this very much. Theatrics of, like, when you're filming scenes, my God, does it lend itself so well to just giving you that extra bit of just world building and like realism, doesn't it? Like any of your videos, dude, like when you're filming, you and I know this, like it's such a big thing to have that with that. So you and I very much enjoy that factor. But yeah, no, George, please tell us about your layout stuff.
Yeah.
Love that.
So, one of the things I really took it more here being in Durango because watching the railroad, we have that world famous Durango and Silverton Railroad with those nasty old steam engines running every day. That we have to, past the McDonald's there. But one of the things is that, when I'm watching them doing the morning switching, the first thing they do is usually they bring the engine out and they have to throw the switches and then come over and then they wait and stop. Then they have to manually throw the switch back and then they turn and they're doing whistle signals and the whole 9 yards. And it really got me thinking. It's like, I know people who I've operated with over the years. Now, granted, this is long before I donned the purple shirt, but I had a friend of mine, we were at a yard and he was operating. He just sets his throttle to speed step 10 or 12 or whatever it is. And his switching is done with the direction button. And I'm like, whoa, wait. So, You're running at speed step 10. You crash into the cut of cars to hit your coupler, breaking all the stuff in the first car. Then you change the direction switch to yank that coupler out to finish the job. And then he pulls that cut of cars, and then he just goes in and drops his skewer to cut the couplers apart, to where he needs to. And I'm just like, if we're focusing on trying to make these realistic scenes, we want to make sure the scenes look good, the trees look right, the buildings are realistic, but then we run our trains like slot cars. Who threw, like, for example, you're coming into the yard and somebody walks 10, 15 feet ahead of them, they're throwing turnouts. It's like, well, who threw those turnouts? Superman or the Flash? Did he jump out of the cab, run over there really quickly, throw all those turnouts, and then run back to the engine? No. So so when you approach the switches that are manually, not CTC, you'd come to the train would actually stop, and then the conductor or the brakeman would have to get out, walk over, throw the switch, visually inspect it. And then if there was a yard ladder and he was going to the third track, or he already knew that, he'd walk that yard, throw in the switches properly, looking at it. And then when it was clear, he would have a hand signal to the engineer, okay, come to me. And the engineer would come, and then they'd slow down. And of course, prior to OSHA and all that stuff, he'd jump on the moving train, but now they got to stop and he's got to get on, and then he can run down the rest of the track with them. And then the guy in the caboose would then presumably come out and throw the switches the other way. And so that's where we as model railroaders tend to throw so much into an operating session, because I've got to get 15 trains across this 20-foot long layout, because otherwise my operators are going to be bored. Or you could teach them how to use the locomotives and the decoders more realistically. And then now they could spend, an hour doing an operating job that, if you had no momentum and no braking, could take you 10 minutes. But once you factor in the people, because the fun part of it to me is running the trains. And Johnny, I'm like you, I like to do the industries. I like to do the switching, and the roundy round is fine at sometimes. Sometimes you just need to get out and just kind of mind numb and go to sleep and run the train in loop. And I get it. And I still enjoy that as well, depending on the scenario. But I enjoy the operations part of it, and, adding momentum, braking. And then, I see that we want to talk about the dynamic digital exhaust, where the dynamic exhaust will change how the decoder sounds based on the load. And so as you're accelerating a train, it's going to get a lot louder.
Yeah.
Or the diesel engine is going to notch up to simulate getting that train up to speed. And it's going to sound different than when you're cutting the throttle. And by adding momentum, the dynamic exhaust, and all those features, man, it really brings those locomotives to life. They're not just, like you said, glorified noisemakers.
Yeah. The fact that you can install Blunami into a product that, say, is in 3-rail $100 diesel, and you can have the revs notch up and down based on the load behind it, the curves, the grade, your throttle control, is phenomenal. In past, to have the labor on a steam engine adjust, you'd either have to be going really fast with an MTH engine, a Lionel engine. It was based on your brake setting or a separate digital exhaust meter on the remote. And then as of late, Lionel, you have to buy a $2,000+ Vision Line steam engine to have a little sensor on your tender that when it has more load on it, it increases the labor, which doesn't really work to begin with. And so the fact that you can have that in not only steam engines but also diesels, and in a product that is affordable, it can go into just about anything. It's just amazing. It brings it to anything you want. And then we mentioned this earlier, is the wheel slip. That's another thing that was not in MTH models and limited to very few Lionel models. That's a sound that you can hear when you're near a steam engine, or when you're they do tests with steam engines. If you want to simulate those tests in your yard, or you want to simulate that you have a really, really heavy, like Broadway Limited behind your Penske K4 or T1, whatever it might be. Heck, the Penske T1s and Penske S1s were known for having wheel slip. So the fact that you can simulate all that, it's all integrated and it makes sense, is just phenomenal. It's just like we keep adding uh basically features onto a list of things that just makes this product so interesting and worth investing in. Um, and we've barely probably touched the surface, as always. And there's more,
And there's more.
There's always more with this. I've discovered so many things just messing around with my engines, and Johnny showing me things, and then watching your videos, George. There's so many things I haven't known about, and the fact that they're there. And you mentioned it's 16 channels of audio. I think MTH is like 8 or something, and so you'll be running an MTH engine, and you'll just hear a sound disappear because something else is playing.
Well, put it this way, compare it to just Steam alone. 2 features that, and Norm has showed this off in his video as well.
Yeah.
2 things that, we'll put it this way. How many, I don't think you can point to any OSCA manufacturer that has rod clank in their engine. So if I cut that throttle and that engine's just coasting, I hear that rod clank. I can make that rod clank super quiet or make it as loud as I want it to be by changing the settings there.
Yep.
Or kind of touching base with little things that you never really thought about, but you have the ability to control. I mean, George, prior to watching your videos and your webinars, I didn't even know what the hell a snifter valve was. I was like, what the heck is it? Like, that's just a word they made up and put in the app.
Dr. Seuss word.
I mean, to be fair, there's so many sounds on there people don't know about. You talked about the snifter valve. Well, that's for those people who don't know, that's a valve that sits on top of the steam chest. And when there's no pressure in the steam chest, the valves and the cylinders, it actually opens up and allows any of the vented steam, instead of condensing, to vent out. Because when water condenses, when it's cooler, it doesn't compress the same way as steam. And so if you get too much water in the cylinders, there's such tight clearance between the end of the cylinder and the cylinder head, you can actually blow the cylinder head off. So the snifter valve opens up, allows that to vent. And then that's why usually when the steam engine started, they open the cylinder cocks, which are down on the bottom of the cylinder, to help blow any of that excess water out before the steam gets in there. Because if you don't compress water the same way as steam, you can blow the cylinder head off, and then your steam locomotive's in op. But Sid, one of the things I wanted to mention with wheel slip is, what you're talking about is the sound of the drivers breaking loose off the rails.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's a function button that you can trigger. And it basically not only is the sound of the chuff, 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 chuff come back underneath, but it's also the sound of the engineer backing the throttle off and kind of playing with the valves a little bit. And when we were designing this, we actually entertained the idea of goosing the motor to sync with it, because the motors would drive, because if right now it's just a sound effect.
Yeah.
Because the wheels would be slowly turning, but it's a sound effect. It's a cool sound effect. And we were thinking of goosing the motors with it to kind of break the wheels loose. But then we remembered things like traction tires and the smaller scales and decided, let's just make it a sound effect, because then you have this model that jumps forward and makes it an undesirable sound. So we decided to make it just a sound effect. But yeah, you're right. Another one that we hear a lot people don't know is a dynamo.
Yeah, the dynamo is amazing, and the fact that you have the variety of them is just great. Not all my engines sound the same. That was sort of an issue with MTH and Lionel now. MTH, you have some customization there, but you turn on 3 steam engines and they all sound exactly the same.
Yeah, but most people don't even know what the steam, what this dynamo is. And Johnny, you were saying you didn't know the snifter valve. They didn't know the dynamo. And I had a call even last week. Guy says, well, every time I turn on the headlight, I get this high-pitched interference sound. How do I turn that off? And it's like, well, to be fair, I'll speak again from personal experience. Before I donned the purple shirt, I lived in Dallas, Texas. There's not exactly a whole lot of steam engines there that are running dynamos. And so it wasn't something I'd paid attention to. And so when I got my first Tsunami sound and put it in my Athearn Challenger, I heard the dynamo and I finally figured out what it was and went, oh, I hate that sound. I'm going to turn it off because I've never heard a diesel make that sound. Why would a steam engine make that sound? Well, when me and my wife got married, we went up and chased the 844 and the 3985. They were supposed to double head, but without getting into a long story, the 3985 broke. They had to limp it home. Anyway, we pull up on the dead 3985, and I open the door, and that's the first sound I hear. And I went, well, guess I'm fixing that, because I'm not around. I wasn't around diesel or steam engines before. I've only been around diesels, and so I don't fault people for not knowing what they are, but they're not there. And we live in Durango, Colorado. Like I said, we have steam engines here. We know what these sounds are. We know what they sound like. And so that's why we're able to add that extra element of realism, because you may have some company based in Germany or something like that, making sound systems that isn't around steam engines. And so they make it a glorified noisemaker. Like you said, I push button, make noise. But we know how the locomotives work and interact. And so we're able to build, like you said, a simulation of the sound system of the locomotives.
I remember being a kid having my little Rail King GS2 from MTH, and I just never questioned what the sound was. I'm just like, yeah, I turned on train, it makes a weird whining sound. But after doing the research and kind of watching videos, like you said, you stand next to a steam locomotive, you hear that dynamo. It is high pitched, and you will notice it. So when it's not there, it's definitely odd. So the fact that you have so much variety is huge.
Johnny loves the dynamo sound.
Yeah, Matt.
There's
Matt
times where I'm like,
hates it when I do
dude,
it.
you got to shut that down. It's giving me a headache. It's so piercing.
and like the fact that you can have the dual dynamo, I think, or it's triple dynamo for like the GS4. No O-scale models have that. None of the 3-run manufacturers have ever put that in. Even I think maybe Lionel did it once, but again, you had to buy a $2,500 Vision Line model. Just to obtain that. And I was going to mention one of the sounds that's just like incredible to me. I'm blanking. There's so many. I'm now visually going through the list of function keys and things I always press. But yeah, it's just fantastic.
George, I gotta ask, just for my own personal curiosity, is because you guys have so many different chuffs, and each chuff has its own wheel slip. Is that something that was digitally created, or was that how did you guys get the audio for that, or is that something that you guys recorded, or is that a secret?
No, well, yes and no. I mean, but basically each chuff has its own recording, and how the algorithm internally plays the chuff. One of the things we noticed, like with the original Tsunami, for example, there was only one channel for the chuff. Mm-hmm. And so as you got faster, it would sort of helicopter a little bit. Like you'd get a chuff as instead of naturally coming out, it would be abruptly cut off because it had to play the next chuff to keep it in time. Mm-hmm. So as you got faster, it would kind of helicopter, and especially if you had an articulated locomotive. And so one of the things we wanted to do was to have a much more sophisticated algorithm, so that way, when we're playing the chuffs in this, you get a more realistic experience. The chuffs kind of play together instead of helicoptering or cutting each other off. And so we actually recorded chuffs at different speeds to try to kind of blend them in a little bit so that they sound more realistic. And so there's actually multiple chuff recordings instead of just 4 chuffs, the chuff, 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 chuff. There's actually more recordings of it at different speeds, and then the decoder determines how to play those different ones at different speeds to make sure that they don't blend or cut each other off. So a slower speed, you're going to hear that full chuff, 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 but at a faster speed, you might hear chuff, 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 chuff. So there is an intelligent algorithm playing in there that plays multiple chuffs. I know there's some brands out there that claim they have, we've got 20 different chuff recordings of this one steam engine and it just plays it. It's like, well, they don't just play randomly. It's still a reciprocating steam engine. So you're always going to get that chuff, 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 chuff pattern. You're always going to get that same pattern. It's reciprocal. It's just sped up. Mm-hmm. So this randomly playing of 20 different chuff recordings isn't realistic either. And so those are the types of steps that we try to make sure that the simulation doesn't ruin the illusion. Where if you hear transitions between recordings, or like say, for example, the whistle is actually 3 recordings, there's the attack, the sustained, and the decay. And our sound engineers have to make sure those sounds are seamless so that you and I don't hear the transition from one sound clip to the other, or else it ruins the illusion of what we're trying to create.
Enjoying this week's topic? You can join in on the conversation too on our community Discord server. We have a lot of different discussion channels, ranging from showing off your collection, discussing the latest and greatest in the industry, a buy and sell forum, and even a voice channel you can hop on call and talk trains with us late into the night. We're a little over 300 strong, and we'll love to have you join us too. Check out the invite link to our community Discord down in the show notes. Read and acknowledge the rules, and introduce yourself and start chatting. We have a great team of moderators who make sure all are welcomed and respected. So what are you waiting for? Come on down and join us in on the fun, and let's talk some trains.
Yeah, it's great. I love the sounds in all of my my steamers. I actually got to mess around with a diesel for the first time when I was out in Chicago. I don't have very many diesels in my collection. Funny enough, the one Blunami equipped diesel that I've messed with the most is our Alco PA that we have for our podcast. It resides in my home, and it's amazing. And the revs, just there's just so much depth to everything. I can't get over how immersive this can really be. And you don't have to play with everything. Like we said, you could just be your loop runner and that's fine. Just letting the train run. You can be doing operations. I think one of my favorite things that I've done when I first got this and was really getting into it was just sort of doing like startup-esque operations of, I have a very large engine facility, and just letting an engine start up, turning on the dyno, having the lights, having it sit there long enough to where the pop-off valve goes off and then me needing to do a blowdown or something. That's just
and then you go coal it up and water it up.
Yes, exactly. All that's built in. You can do everything, from the app, and it's so fun. And that's just within my yard limits. That's not even the main line. You mentioned cylinder cocks earlier. Like, it's such a simple thing that all steam engines have, but like, thank you for that being in there, because MTH has it, but it plays for like four, like basically one revolution of a driver. Lionel has only ever put it in like four steam engines ever. And so the fact that I can have it be automatic or activated by me, like I'm the actual engineer, is just fantastic, and have set the timing for it and everything. And also be synced somewhat to the, the movement of the cylinders. It's not just a constant hiss. It is changing as the cylinders go in and out.
So I'll add a little bit to that. So you talk about triggering it manually by yourself. Well, There's a couple of things, and this goes back to knowing how steam engines work. Because in the real world, let's say we go record the 4014 or the 4449 or the 611 or whatever.
Yeah.
When they're starting off, they've got all these photographers all lined up and down the track. What better show than to open the cylinder cocks and blow it all out, right? And you get this beautiful picture of the steam engine with the steam blowing out of it. It looks fantastic. That's for the show.
Yeah.
But the real world, all they're doing, like I was talking about, is they're blowing out the condensated water out there so they don't blow off the cylinder cock. So it's usually not a very long time, but it's certainly a lot shorter or longer than what you're describing with the other sound systems, but it's nowhere near as long as like what we're seeing when they do railfan trips.
Yeah.
But here's the other factor of it is that, let's say for argument's sake, if you're the fireman and you're doing the injector, and then now you got, I need to get more water in there. Hang on, let me throw a thing of coal in here. Oh crap, I filled the boiler up too high. Now I can open the cylinder cocks, and that'll blow out any of the water that may have been sucked into the dry pipe. And so we've left that option to you as the user. If you want to simulate that while you're running your train, you could be running it like, say, speed 35, 40 miles an hour, and you can turn on the injector manually and then say, oh crap, I filled it up too high.
Yeah.
I got to blow that
Mhm.
out. So it's up to you. You can make more of those type of situations. Again, simulating running the real thing, or we should change the term loop-de running. We should call it more railfan mode.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
where
There you
they're
go.
rail fanning their trains and watching it run around in the loop, which is fine. So that gives them something to do if they are just running loops. It gives them something to play with. And
Yeah.
if somebody says, "Hey, what's that sound?" "Oh, well, my fireman wasn't paying attention. He overfilled the boiler." And then they go,
Yeah.
"What?"
Yeah.
It's that kind of fun part of it that adds it into it. So yeah, we wanted to make sure to give you the tools to simulate real railroading, but also make it simple enough that if you do want to just railfan mode it, you're perfectly welcome to do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we're kind of coming to the end of the show here, but I kind of wanted to just sort of wrap up on a very positive note. Not that the whole show has not been a wealth of positivity, but George, as someone who, you know, you're a modeler yourself, like you said, no one is born knowing this hobby and the techniques and the skills required to do this. You know, obviously, since this is a very new product, and especially people in O scale, but not just O scale, anyone, you know, doing Blunami, but specifically for O scale, what would you kind of recommend for someone who's a little bit apprehensive and doesn't really know if they want to take the jump of, you know, they've always done the regular systems, you know, Legacy and TMCC and DCS, but what would you recommend, and just have any tips for someone who wants to make that jump into Blunami for the first time, you know, putting their own decoder in, but might not really know where to start or just needs a little bit of encouragement? What would you recommend?
Sure. So first off, you guys have some great resources on your channel. Sid and Johnny, I know you guys have some great information on there showing the use in the 3-rail, being able to, you know, Sid, you've done installations, and Johnny, I think you've
Mhm.
done an installation, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Um, but if you want to look at it, I mean, we have a YouTube channel. If you go to either our soundtraxx.com website and link to it there, or just go to youtube.com and search Soundtraxx Blunami, you should find us. It has our logo in the little icon or whatever. And we've been doing a lot of videos. We post a new video every week. Try to be short, 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes 10 to 15, depending on the topic. And kind of learn about it, to look at the, you know, the introduction to Blunami and just kind of what it is. And then you can go back and watch, you know, range. We did the range video we talked about. We've done kind of shows the app in some cases. Right now I'm actually shooting a video, and I actually ran out of time today to finish it. So I've got a couple more segments left. That's going to go up the weekend of May 3rd, whatever that is, 3rd and 4th. Depending on when this is posted, but it's a deep dive into the app. What I'm actually doing is showing various things on the app in a more long form version, as opposed to, hey, here's how you change here's how you change the sound. Great. For more information, go to our website. But as far as installation, we've got a lot of resources on our website, and both on our YouTube channel as well. We have a webinar series that once upon a time we used to do retailer training, and I say once upon a time meaning we're going to resurrect it again, but due to that pesky virus that broke out that you may have heard of in 2020, we kind of shut a lot of that stuff down. And so we haven't resurrected it yet because personnel has changed over the time. Of the people in our company right now who have offered it, it's me and Nancy, which is the co-owner of the company. And we're the only ones that are still here right now that have ever done it in the past. So it's a large undertaking, but the webinar videos are taken from those classes, and they're all about Tsunami 2. So you can still use that information because, like I talked about earlier, the Tsunami or the Blunami is a Tsunami 2. It's just now has the Bluetooth chip. And then you can watch those videos. Like webinar 10 is one of my favorite ones to refer people when it comes to Steam, because I talk about what every single sound that you're hearing, what the injector is, what the snifter valve is, what all that is, so you can hear it and see it and understand what you're hearing. And then you can kind of decide from there. But the other thing is, you know, with the Blunami, you can also look at it this way. If you have a model that you're thinking of it, you know, buy a Blunami, put it in, play around with it. If you don't like it, you can still sell it. But I've yet to have anybody come up to me and say, you know, I wasted that money on that dang Blunami, so I want to get my money back. Everybody comes up and says, you know, I was skeptical, and Now that's the best thing ever. I didn't realize it was so cool. And then we have our user's guide, which are the user's manuals, which basically explain all of the sounds that you're hearing. Chapter 1, because that's where we explain what the snifter valve is, what the dynamo is, what the injector is, what Fireman Fred turning wrenches is, or Fireman Fred doing a frame check. If you don't know what that is, I would encourage you guys to look that one up. But those sounds are all in there and they explain it. So there's a lot of resource. Plus, we're a phone call or an email away. We actually answer our phones. We're eager to help you. Like he said, we're modelers. And so we've been there and we want to help you enjoy your hobby. We would, obviously we want to sell you my products, but we want you to enjoy using them. And so call us. Don't hesitate. Say, hey, I heard you on the podcast, or, hey, I saw you at this show or whatever, and I'd like to carry on that conversation. And we'll carry on that conversation. Or you can email us. You can email us at support@soundtraxx.com, or you can get me directly at George B. That's GeorgeB as in boy, at soundtraxx.com. And I'll be happy to carry on any conversations, because every single email, make sure I answer every one, because it's important to you. So it's important to me to make sure you're happy and get the answers you need.
For sure. And you guys do a fantastic job with your videos. I'd say the majority of the information that Sid and I know from on your product is from those videos. You cover everything, and even things that we didn't know, like when I was like, oh, when my decoder fires up and gets track power with my steam engine, it makes noise immediately. And then you're like, well, here's a video on quiet mode. And there's a bunch of stuff that if anybody wants to, if you're hesitant about Blunami and you want to know what you're getting into first, definitely check out George's videos. They're super helpful. And for a person who, if not the biggest reader when it comes to instruction manuals, obviously read the instruction manual, but if you want that in more digestible format, those videos are the perfect way to do that. And I cannot recommend them enough.
Likewise.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. That sounded great to me.
Good deal. Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Matt, you want to kind of take us home here, man?
Absolutely. So let's really quickly hit our server boosters. So we have an amazing community, and we like to take a moment to shout out to some fantastic people who boosted the server, helped us keep the lights on here at the Miniature Models Podcast Discord server. SDiv_Tim, Tim's Trains, Blue Comet Fan 833, Matty C Trains, Newt 1969, Commodore Ghost Ninja, The Rambles, Hard Work Pays Off, Dashing Dan's Trains, Everyday's Life, SD70 Train Fan, and IW. So we really appreciate you, and it's the listeners who inspire us to keep the show going, and we make this show for all of you folks. Really fast, if you can, please leave a review on your chosen podcast app. It really helps promote us. And, well, tonight was an awesome show, but I see our stop is coming up next. If you'd like to get more of us off the air, where can folks find you, George?
So we have our YouTube channel, so you can go to youtube.com, search Soundtraxx. We also have a Facebook page, and we are also on our website, soundtraxx.com, or you can email us questions about decoders, sales questions, which decoder do I want, at sales@soundtraxx.com, or you can email us for questions like tech support, how do I trigger this sound effect or whatever. Those would go to support@soundtraxx.com.
Johnny, how about yourself?
You can find me on YouTube at Audamus. That's AUDAMUS. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Audamus_trains, where I post a lot more stuff on there and a lot more active than I am on YouTube. Last but not least, you can find me on the Miniature Models Podcast Community Discord, where I'm reading and responding to all of your posts and making a fool of myself in the voice chat. So come on down. It's lots of fun.
Excellent. John S., how about yourself, sir?
You can find me on YouTube as RetroMikado, Instagram as RetroMikado96, and just like my fellow hosts, on the MMP Discord server under RetroMikado. If you haven't joined yet, why not? I love talking with you all in there. It's a ton of fun.
And Sid, how about yourself, sir?
You can find me on YouTube as Sid's Trains, Instagram as Sydney's Trains, and on the MMP Discord server as Sid's Trains. Join our community on Discord, where you can share your experiences, ask questions, and stay up to date on the hobby.
And you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram as WC Model Railroad. You can also find me on the MMP Discord server doing admin stuff and, well, keeping the lights on. Don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Check us out on Instagram at Miniature Models Podcast for exclusive content you can't get anywhere else. And be sure to use our affiliate link whenever you purchase from trains.com. We really appreciate you all. As we always say, it's the listeners who inspire us to keep the show going, and we make this show for all of you. With that said, everyone have a wonderful night.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, guys.
Good night,
Thank you, George.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun.